of Sinaloa. So Sinaloa is the place in Mexico which is the cradle of drug trafficking, a bit like Sicily is to the Italian mafia. And out of there, you get these Sinaloan kingpins arising. Now, Felix Gallardo was at some point he started a business. He did some, quite an like kind of business high school. Did some studies there, and then so he had obviously a business mind, an economics mind, and he was a police officer for a little while, and at one was a bodyguard as a police officer, assigned as a bodyguard to some political family, and then emerged in the drug trade when the Mexican military hit really hard the business in Sinaloa, and the people moved to Guadalajara, kind of moved from Sinaloa where a lot of heat was on to the city of Guadalajara, and they set up these operations. And there's debate really about whether he was a clear leader or it was more of a collection of these various drug traffickers. Him, there was this guy, Caro Quintero, and this guy, Ernesto Fonseca, with this kind of trio of people who created this, first cartel in Mexico.
That was Don Neto.
Yeah.
So that was my second question, actually. I knew a guy who flew loads for these guys, and he said Caro Quintero, when he got on the coke, he became psychopathic and started killing American citizens. Can you explain to us who is Caro Quintero?
So Caro Quintero was, of this trio, whereas Felix Gallardo had a bit of an image of being quite a cultured guy. He bought a lot of pieces of art with his money. He had the kind of idea of, had this kind of education and this kind of business ideas about the organization. And Caro Quintero was kind of flamboyant cowboy. He gave interviews from prison. In his interviews, he's kind of, this in the 80s, back in the 80s, you can see videos of him giving these real interviews when the press came in and he was talking to all the journalists, and he was like, he was very charismatic, like life's treated me well, very ostentatious. There's stories like your friend was saying, or like the guy you knew was saying, stories of him getting, taking a lot of cocaine, getting really nuts. There's a story about these American, which is shown in the Narcos series, these Americans who were murdered in the restaurant by Caro Quintero and the other guys.
They were Jehovah's Witnesses, were they? Someone was an author, wasn't he? And Jehovah's Witnesses.
Some kind of writer, some kind of writer. I mean, it's in the series. It has him taking notes and stuff. I think just wrong place at the wrong time, and this happens to this day. I mean, there was a guy recently in America when there's been various Americans killed, wrong place at wrong time, and accused of being American agents.
They tried to charge Chapo with some of those murders years ago. It was raised that he was one of the people involved, but I think that got dropped. It wasn't included when he was extradited, at least.
Yeah, in the trial in the United States, they didn't include individual murders. It wasn't a murder case. They included it. They showed the murders to support the charges against him for drug trafficking. But it was interesting. There wasn't the murders. There wasn't gun trafficking charges, even though they moved a lot of guns down to Mexico as well. It was about drugs, and he'd do life for the drugs anyway.
So Narcos pretty much showed that Caro Quintero engineered Sensimilia himself, but that was floating around California and all these other states before.
Yeah.
But he did have a role in the mass production of it in this arid.
Yeah.
What happened there?
So yeah, there was a real ranch. There was a real ranch there, known as in real life, the Buffalo Ranch, that scene's based on. They changed the state, I think, in the TV series, but it was in Chihuahua, and it was really in a kind of desert area, and they pumped a bunch of water there, and it was apparently really Sensimilia. And he was, there was these various shareholders, and he was kind of his project, Caro Quintero's project. So it was, making marijuana apparently on an incredible industrial scale. They just had a huge, huge marijuana plantation. And, at the time, this is going back to the 80s. So, I mean, nowadays, the market for selling marijuana from Mexico is tougher because now they're producing a lot of marijuana legally in California, in Washington State, in a whole bunch of places. But back then, it was like this was, they had a big illegal market in marijuana. There's still some of it now. They can still grow marijuana in Mexico now and sell it in the United States. But back then, it was a huge deal.
So we've got this original Mexican cartel, Guadalajara based, 3 principals, El Padrino, Caro Quintero, Don Neto. Their obstacle is the 2,000 mile, is it 2,000 mile border, did you say?
Yeah, 2,000 miles, yeah.
What methods did this original cartel use in the beginning then to get the drugs into America?
So then they do some just flying over the border, which you're saying your friend, the guy you knew, flew loads, and I've talked to guys who flew loads then as well in this period in the 80s. And then it was quite easy to fly private planes over the border. So planes full of drugs.
Yeah, that's what he had.
Yeah, just fly them over. Now it's harder. Now you can still then and now walk over the border. Just walk over with backpacks full of drugs. So the way they do that, to this day, is they normally pack into 25 kilo loads of marijuana. Now you get paid for carrying a 25 kilo. Now some will double up and carry 50 kilos on their back, which that's the same as a sack of cement. So imagine walking over the desert with a sack of cement on your back. But yeah, these guys will do that for a payment, just walk into the United States over the desert. Now that to this day, I mean, obviously over the years you get every method for taking drugs into the US. So you get, air, walking over. You've got giant catapults throwing drugs over the wall, climbing over the wall with backpacks of drugs. And there's a video which I think Donald Trump commented in reaction to that video, which a journalist I know took that video where they were on the US side of Nogales, and they saw some people climbing over the border fence with 2 backpacks full of drugs. They saw them with the video filming, and the guys were like, what are you filming? And they carried on filming. They went back into the United States and just climbed. It just shows how easily they climbed the wall. Tunnels, obviously, big deal. Now, tunnels apparently began, is what a guy told me, a smuggler in Nogales told me, that the tunnels began as naturally occurring underground rivers. And, they would go under the border, and they used those and gradually made them bigger. And then Chapo was obviously very big with making tunnels. But the real place for taking a huge amount of drugs over the border are the official crossings, and hiding them in cars and in trucks. And, they call them, the old school method is in tires. But you have, they will call them trap cars, very sophisticated, secret compartments. Some of them are weird, like you'd have to turn on the air conditioning, do this, do that, and suddenly the compartment will open. But it's because there's so many vehicles crossing the border, you cannot physically search them all. You can only search a pretty tiny percentage. I mean, well, you know this too well yourself.
That's what I relied on to get my XC across.
And which border was
Nogales?
that? Nogales. Oh, right, Nogales.
Yeah.
And it was cars?
Yeah, like a nice brand new SUV, University of Arizona stickers, diving tanks, computers, pills screwed into computer towers.
Yeah.
All tourist bric-a-brac, been down spring break, all the tourist traffic, all the students all backed up.
And where were you hiding the ecstasy?
So the ecstasy would get put on a flight from Paris to Mexico City. It'd be purchased over in Holland and then took over to France. This was before 9/11. Some of the smugglers just had them in pillowcases. You could just put them on a plane in pillowcases back then. But if they wanted to be more secure, they screwed into computer towers or something more secure. So Mexico City, either fly over to Hermosillo if they didn't want to risk that flight, just get on the bus. One guy got on a bus. Took several days to get to from Mexico City to get to where we were in Puerto Peñasco. So once that person's finished his route, pills are handed over to me in Puerto Peñasco, and then I've got other teams of smugglers taking them over the American border. It was actually we had one smuggler who flew into Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport with the pills. And the DA weren't too hip, or the customs weren't too hip, because they stopped her, took her into a room. She had them in vitamin jars. They opened the luggage, put the vitamin jars on the table, said to her, "What are they?" She goes, "Vitamins." And they went, "Cool, have a nice day," and put them back in the luggage. So I consulted a lawyer after that. And it was the lawyer who told me to go through Mexico. Yeah.
So I mean, but going through the Nogales, I mean, obviously a lot easier than going to the border then. Another way was trains for a long time, freight trains, these big freight trains that go between Mexico and the United States. They hide loads of drugs in these long freight trains. But to this day, that land border is something they haven't been able to stop. I mean, all this war on drugs the last 10, 15 years, particularly, all this violence in Mexico. Drugs are still going over that border all the time. I mean, just look at the numbers. They're not changing. I mean, it seems to be more changing according to the habits of what drugs Americans want rather than what they're really succeeding in stopping, getting over the border. But they haven't found a way to seal that and to stop drugs going over there.
We're going to get to all that towards the end. All right, then. So we've done the formation of the Guadalajara cartel. And then along comes Kiki Camarena. What's Kiki's story? How did he get in this position?
So Kiki Camarena is one of what have been many Mexican-American DA agents. And if you look at all the people who have done the infiltrations in Mexico, it's been Mexican-American agents. Obviously, the Anglo-American agents haven't been able to infiltrate the cartels in the same way. So you look at other guys like Mike Vigil, who's a Mexican-American from New Mexico, who's the longest serving DA agent in Mexico, did like 13 years altogether and did a lot of infiltration work. You look at various, some other FBI, the FBI agent who was threatened by Osel Cardenas personally. He's also Mexican-American. There's been various, Mexican-American agents who have come from these border communities and been recruited and been able to infiltrate cartels through the language, through the whole thing of understanding. For actually saying that, Kiki Camarena did not do the infiltration in the same way, did not do the heavy undercover work like some of them have done. I mean, I have an interview in my first book with a DA agent who did quite heavy undercover of going into the cartels and actually saying, "I want to buy large amounts of cocaine." Kiki Camarena was not really doing that. He was doing more street stuff, talking to informants and kind of getting a sense of what was happening there. Now, he went down there from the United States to Guadalajara and was frustrated by the lack of progress, was kind of hungry to try and make the bus. And him and some other people were like sending messages back to Washington saying, "This is a serious situation down here. We've got a serious drug cartel. This is like, you can have a Colombia on the US doorstep," which eventually it has become. And putting a lot of pressure on the Mexican government to commit raids. Now, at that time, as you were saying, it shows the corruption. The Mexican crime is completely interlinked with law enforcement, massively, to the point where often you really can't tell the difference. I mean, there can be policemen you're interviewing that I'm interviewing, I don't really know, are they legitimate policemen or are these drug cartel figures? There's policemen who'll come out afterwards and be like, they'll find they're serial murderers for the cartels, as well as being a policeman. So you really have got basically this intermingling of law enforcement and the cartels. So with this police and cartel structure, they got annoyed by Kiki Camarena, and eventually there was an order given to pick him up, and he was tortured to death, and murdered in a very brutal way. And for the US authorities, this was like a real point, this was a fallen hero, one of theirs, murdered in Mexico.
Just gonna stop you a second, because I'm writing a book called The War on Drugs. The
Yeah.
War on Drugs. We are being lied to. Sorry, the War on Drugs.
Yeah.
So I'm researching exactly how he was killed.
Yeah.
And here's my draft. So I'll read it to you and let me see if this is consistent with what your own research. The torture began with slaps and punches to his neck and face. He was blindfolded, his hands tied behind his back, and then they broke his nose and the bone above his eyes. When he was unconscious, a doctor arrived. They washed some of the blood off him, threw cold water onto his face, and he revived. They wanted names and to know how the DEA obtained information. Electrical wires tied to his testicles delivered shocks. While he screamed and flailed, a screw was positioned on his skull, which turned and bore into his skull. Leave my family alone, he repeated. Please don't hurt my family. When they asked for names and addresses, there were more slaps, punches, electric shocks, and teeth removed. Men jumped off a bed onto his back, breaking his ribs, which pierced his lungs. A red-hot iron rod inserted into his anus created a new level of screams. Judges and police who listened to the tape, eventually later on recording of the torture, reported that it had made them vomit and they had endless sleepless nights. Is that consistent with...
I mean, that sounds pretty much how it might well have gone down. I mean, I haven't listened to the tapes personally. I mean, the tapes are out there somewhere. I mean, there must be some way to get hold of those tapes and hear. Those tapes are out there. I don't know, exactly who's got them now. But that's kind of been reported, and I reported on the autopsy of the body, which showed those wounds. I mean, it was a kind of blunt blow to the head, which kind of caved in his skull. I think how he died, and the basically he was raped with item as well. I mean, it's pretty brutal. Yeah, very, very sad things for that. There's been a lot of horrific violence in Mexico, and it's one of many. But for the U.S. authorities, was something which has kind of led to this. It's been a real marking point, a real changing point, and something being seen as a fallen hero of one of their men going down the front lines.